And thanks everyone. Thank everyone for coming. I guess we'll do introductions and we can start right here.
Forrest Dunbar, Assembly.
David Nesbitt, Board of Ethics.
Jackie Yeagle, Municipal Clerk's Office.
Amanda Moser, Clerk's Office.
Pete Peterson, Chair, and in the audience.
David Dunsmore, staff to distribution.
Michael Dunsmore, just audience.
All right, great.
Staff David Dunsmore.
And I guess we'll start then with the Board of Ethics update.
I don't have a lot to add. We had a regularly scheduled meeting, 2 weeks ago or so. We're progressing with the letters of I think we have several notices of potential violation that we're working on. We have a couple of advisory opinions we're also working on that are in the process of getting signed and finalized. We have some other specific answers that Dee Ennis has been researching for a simple type of it was just like an informal quick request type question. And no special meetings this month. We're going to meet a regularly scheduled meeting next month. And that's all I have to add this month.
All right, so Dee is still working on the rewrite of the ethics code.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And is that something you're going to be discussing then at your next monthly meeting, or?
Let's see. What we can do is at a very minimum give you an update on where we're at.
Okay, Mr. Dunbar.
Is Dee working with Julia Tucker on that stuff? And also, will the update include some of the reforms to the gift policy that we talked about, or does it have to be a separate initiative or a separate ordinance?
No, I mean, whatever, if the amendments to the gifted part of it will be, we can include that in our update.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a separate sort of deal. And as far as working with Julia, I know that ever since how long have I been on this board now? 5 years, 4 or 5 years. We've always consulted with Julia any step of the way because of her background experience. And so she's always and so she's always involved in some way or the other with what's going on. If that helps answer that question.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think she's a good resource. She's been here for, what, a decade now, something like that?
And what's really nice is that she often brings a very different perspective. She and Dee don't always agree on things, which is...
That's not a big surprise.
No, but I mean, that's extremely helpful to have two opposing viewpoints that we end up kind of navigating. I have found that relationship to be the best of the negotiation part of a relationship. I think it's worked out great.
Good. Well, fantastic.
And that's all I have. It may be excused.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
fine.
Unless you have more questions for me.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Very good.
I think you're excused. Go get lunch somewhere.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Okay.
Don't forget
Oh, your keys.
I would have been right back for these, right? From the parking lot.
Okay, then next on our agenda, I guess we'll go to Amanda for an update on the vote by mail project.
Great. We broke our vote by mail project down into what we've called our big rocks. So I'll just sort of go through and give a short little brief update on each of our big rocks. Sort of more in the order of what we've been working on closely recently. First is the RFPs. We have 3 RFPs that we will go through for the vote by mail project. The first 2 have been published. They've gone through the period for questions to be submitted to the municipality. And those are the envelopes and signature. So when ballots return back to the election center, they will be scanned and the signature on it will be snapshotted and that signature will be confirmed by one of our workers. And the second one is for the election management system and tabulation. So once the envelopes have been reviewed, the signatures has been verified, then at that point the ballots will be removed in their secrecy sleeve, reviewed, and then those will be scanned. And so that second RFP is for that actual tabulation component of it, along with being able to track the different items on the ballot. So for the envelopes and signatures RFP, the proposals are due June 30th, having demonstrations July 11th through 13th, and potential site visits July 18th through 20th, with the final selection on July 26th. And then on the tabulation and election management system, the proposals are due July 8th. The demonstrations are the 18th through the 19th, and site visits, the optional site visits are scheduled for the 20th through the 22nd, with the final selection July 29th. And once we make those selections as far as the envelope and signature component, then we will finalize the third RFP, which is specifically the envelopes and printed materials that are sent out to the voter. So we'll need a print company to be able to do those. Any questions on that?
So, Forrest, any questions? So have we found any more prospective sites for the 6,000 square feet or more that we're looking for?
We are still working on that. Dennis, our project manager, is working closely with Robin Ward from the Real Estate Services to locate those sites. And I think part of the challenge is when I was in Thurston County, I asked the election administrator there how big this space was and was told it was 3,000 square feet. And when we followed back up this spring on that, we actually got the diagram, and it is closer to 10,000 feet. We've identified some space in there that we won't need. There's about 2,000 square feet of pure storage space. They have different requirements for how long they have to maintain their ballots. We only have to maintain stuff for 30 days after the election. They have to maintain things for up to 2 years, and they have a lot more elections, so they do need significant additional space. So we are thinking something closer to 7,000 or 8,000 square feet is going to be a big fit, or better fit for us. But when we originally were looking for space, we were looking in the 3,000 to 5,000 foot range. So kind of somewhat went back to the drawing board on that with this new understanding.
Yes, I spoke with Robin last week, perhaps the week before that, about a variety of topics, and this is one that came up, and she stated, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of their biggest challenges is that this facility can only really be used part of the year, right? And so it's difficult to, we'd have to rent it for the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, making that pencil out is challenging. If we could find some way where when we needed it, we could use it, but then somebody else could share in the cost, that would be very helpful, but we haven't really found the right deal yet.
Well, the problem with that might be is we would still have to store these machines somewhere, and
Yeah.
they're expensive machines that we probably don't want to move around a lot.
They have a large footprint, so there's a lot of challenges if we're talking about moving them.
Yeah, but how many, in a typical year, how often would we sort of be fully staffed and using the space? Like, and when we're not using it, what percentage of that square footage is being used for storage?
So we currently have one election a year, save for during mayoral, the potential of a
Yeah.
runoff. But one thing that we've discussed is if we get our system up and going is, can other jurisdictions also transition to vote by mail and use our space? And that
Oh,
is
that's
something
interesting.
that we have thought about and considered and
Yeah.
definitely have communicated.
Fairbanks is an October election for, a lot of other municipalities are October
Sioux,
elections.
Yeah. So,
States November,
What's that?
the state's elections are in November.
Yeah, and for vote by mail, I don't think it would increase the cost at all to have it here versus another city, right? I mean, the stamp is the stamp, it'll go anywhere
Yeah.
in
And I
Alaska.
think one thing to consider with the state of Alaska is some other jurisdictions do have some trouble sometimes getting stuff in and out. I think I'm thinking more southeast has weather can impact. So
Might
there would be.
end up in Ketchikan.
We're a more logical hub for that kind of thing than June event, actually.
Yeah.
So, interesting. Okay.
So moving, if there's other question,
No.
moving down the list of our big rocks, the second one is the ordinance. So we have passed a resolution directing the clerk's office to explore vote by mail that happened in December of 2015.
Hey, that right?
Oh, but the records show that Mr. Croft is doing this.
Prepared.
Additionally, in March of 2016, we passed an ordinance that just said that elections in the future will be done by mail, but we need to go through and actually clean up specifically how we are going to do our elections as detailed in code. So Dennis Wheeler, our project manager, has a draft, and the clerk's office will be receiving the draft shortly to review it, and then of course we'll bring the draft to this committee for their review. We're thankful to have Dennis Wheeler as the project manager. In 2013 and 2014, the clerk's office worked really closely with Dennis Wheeler on the rewrite to Title 28. And so as far as somebody with an intimate knowledge of Title 28, the elections code, Dennis Wheeler is right there. We also are looking to, after this committee reviews it, roll out the draft to the stakeholders group. They've been very involved for the past year, along with other interested parties that would like to have additional time for review. We've discussed maybe the Equal Rights Commission. We've done some presentations with them, or the ADA Advisory Commission. So we'll work on other rollouts of the draft. Next, we have been working on purchasing drop boxes. So in 2015, we purchased 3 drop boxes from a company called RazorFab. They have these Vote Armor line of election drop boxes that we've seen in Oregon and Washington. We used one this past election. We dropped it off at Fairview, and it had pretty consistent usage for the first time having it, and very limited information on the drop box. And so we have identified spots across the city. We've worked with the school district to get approval for the sites that are on school district. We have just a few other sites we're finalizing approval for. But we are working on making those purchases and having those ready for spring 2017.
I can't remember, this is the last committee meeting, but I talked to Tam Agosti-Giesler about putting him in it. And then they had the resolution, right, at the joint meeting, which unfortunately I missed, but has that been progressing well? Is there any holdup with the school district now?
Resolution on what, on the school district? property?
Allowing us to put drop boxes at school district properties.
The school district's been very supportive, along with the school board, of the drop boxes. They recognize the benefits of shifting away from voters in schools to having them
Drop their kids off and drop their ballot off?
at the same time. And we're only looking at, I think, 8 sites that are specifically schools, and for the first year we did focus on high schools, so to
East.
avoid the small kids, the elementary schools to start with.
So is it all, I mean, is Bartlett one of your prospective sites or just East?
It is, Bartlett is one of the sites. We thought, I think we've gone back and forth on Bartlett. I think we've maybe talked about it at the last meeting.
Yeah.
I think that there's nice access to Bartlett for folks coming on and off the base.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
there's folks who are working on the base. It does make a nice stop there.
Are we talking about the middle schools too, or just high schools?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe they're all
I
just
think
high
they're all
schools.
high schools.
Okay.
There might be one middle school. Windler, maybe?
Okay.
I can email the stuff back out to the committee.
Well, and there was, I only remember one sort of a negative comment about that. One member of the school board said they thought the downside was that there wouldn't be thousands of people in 67 different schools seeing what the schools look like, and probably the only time that many of them would be at those schools over a couple of year period. So they thought that, was somewhat of a downside. But I think the increased security with the unfortunate attacks that have been happening around the world, I think the increased security is probably more important than the loss of visibility. in my opinion. Anything additional?
Just one other little update of some stuff we're working on currently. We are trying to build our database of signatures. So we have, an important component of the vote by mail is to be able to confirm that the registered voter who signed the envelope is the registered voter on file, and other jurisdictions compare against the voter registration database. The state of Alaska maintains the voter registration, but they only have about 20,000 signatures. They update it with signatures from folks who vote absentee in person and who vote question ballots. But voters who vote in the precincts on election days, those signatures that are signed in the precinct register, the state hasn't been adding to their voter registration database. So we are working to go through and scan what signatures we have. We have saved precinct registers from last year's election along with this year to begin a database of municipality of Anchorage signatures, and we are exploring scanning solutions to get to that point and working with RDI, our product manager, to help us.
And so the state, do they maintain those sign-in books for a period of years after the elections, or
We just have ours from our election. So we
don't have access to the states, or they're not interested in us having access to them, or?
we could probably have a conversation with the state, with the primary and with the general election to get their books too. Get those signatures.
I mean, they are having an election this year, so that, you would think that would have an opportunity to collect a significant number of signatures.
Could you repeat for me, and you guys probably talked about this a lot when you were first spinning up this project, but how sort of signature verification works in general? And I also was wondering how you think that will relate to the NIAC suite. Hopefully, I might be bringing a resolution at some point that might go to this committee in support of the PFD voter initiative, the initiative to basically make it so if you sign for the PFD, you're automatically registered to vote. But it's been a long time since I did the initial PFD registration. I can't remember if you have to sign anything. I think it can be done electronically through My Alaska. So that's another set of circumstances where we're going to have a lot of people registered to vote without ever having to actually do a physical signature. So how does that stuff all work? How does the signature verification work?
Great question. Through the chair. So the signature verification, a voter signs the back of their envelope,
Okay.
vote your ballot,
Right.
put in a secrecy sleeve, you put your secrecy sleeve in the envelope, and you sign your envelope, seal it, and send it in. When it arrives back at the election center, and I talked a little bit about the RFP for the envelope and signature. The envelopes are all scanned through a solution that takes a small picture of that signature and also lets the voter registration database know that that voter has sent back in a ballot, so we can track that people aren't voting twice or that we're not receiving multiple ballots from a voter.
Right.
That snapshot of that signature is then pulled out against whatever signature we have on file for that voter. And both those signatures are sent to workers at computers who are looking at two signatures on top of each other and are at a time verifying 3 across. So we're working to create that database of those signatures for those workers to verify.
So I guess two things on that. One, it seems like I'm surprised to hear there's an actual human being looking at them as opposed to some computer that would compare signatures.
And spit out the ones that seemed weird.
Right, that there's not some software to do that to reduce worker hours. And two, so it sounds like the second election, like everything will be good, right? By the second election, we should have a signature for basically every person that votes in Anchorage, or unless there's, for some reason, nobody votes in, unless there's a huge different number of voters, but typically super voters are super voters, so we'll have almost everybody, right? But that first election, I am curious where you're going to get all those signatures. And I guess from a timing perspective, if the PFD initiative passes, it won't actually go into effect until 2017, so that'll be after our first election. So So I guess my point is that my earlier worry probably doesn't matter.
We'll have our first election in 2017, but it won't be late until later 2017?
I don't think the PFD division, the initiatives gives the PFD and the Department of Elections a little bit of lead time to, because if it passes in November 2016, I think it gives them until November. I think it gives them even until the 2018 election, but it gives them a little bit of time,
Right.
you know. And furthermore, this is a municipal election, so I don't know if it forces them to. Anyway, the point is, so I think that worry is taken care of. But I am curious. I would like to learn a little bit more about how you're building this database.
Yeah, and I just would like to, through the chair, if it's okay, respond about the first point you brought up with the human element
Yeah.
for the signature review. So we have worked closely with jurisdictions that are currently vote by mail, and specifically Washington State has been very welcoming, and King County and Thurston County specifically have really reached out. We've had multiple tours at both those sites, and all of Washington State works with the Washington State Troopers to train their election officials in signature verification. And although it does seem like it should take a long time, or why don't we use the machine, each worker is typically able to review 250 signatures per hour. Because you get 3 pulled up on the screen at the same time, and I've watched workers do this, and they just look left to right. And when you have signatures sitting on top of each other, and you're just looking for a few elements to see the similarity between the two,
Yeah.
You're able to look pretty quickly. And once they look at all 3 and okay all 3, they just press one button and all 3 go. They don't have to click, click, click. So even that's pretty fast in the process. If one of the signatures looks slightly different from the other, they just check that one and it goes to a second group for review. So the first group is just looking at getting the bulk of the signatures through that are okay, and the ones that need second review go to a second group who does that second review, and if they need to contact the voter or anything from there, then they're able to do that. But it is, although it does seem like it might take a long time, it does go really quickly with that.
So on the building of the database, I guess it's been a long time since I went through the very basic, initial registering to vote. Is that where you're going to get a lot of the signatures?
If anyone updates their voter registration this year in any way on one of those sheets, not online, then the state will capture that signature. So there are a variety of ways that the state is capturing signatures. It's just voters who are voting in their precinct on election day. Without what we're exploring for a signature solution, the state isn't capturing those, but we hope to capture those.
Okay. So you guys are confident then that we're going to build a pretty, solid database?
We are working diligently to identify how many signatures we have access to and to find some sort of scanning solution so that we're able to go through. When you think about the precinct register, there's, something like 18, 20 signatures, spaces on a page. So we're trying to find some solution so we could scan, and they're still in that dot matrix.
Yeah.
Scan all those pages and then go through and pull those signatures and tie those signatures back to the voter registration.
Interesting.
So that would be a fairly time-consuming thing, I would imagine. Do you think we'd have to bring on extra election workers or someone part-time in the clerk's office to handle that, or?
Yeah, we are definitely recognizing that that's a large component of this project, and RDI, the project manager, is definitely taking the lead on that, but we do have access to a large number of election workers that are always excited to come out and work with us on any little project, so we do have significant staff resources if we need them.
Great.
I've been repeating to people, I want to make sure it's true, that we don't expect I thought you said at one of our discussions, we don't expect substantial savings from this because in very rough terms, we think the costs will have, but we'll get twice as much voters, cost per voter.
The startup cost is pretty significant transitioning to vote by mail, so we won't recognize savings for years. But as the idea and why we are exploring it is to increase voter participation. And also, the current system that we have has a lot of challenges outside of the low voter turnout. We are using election equipment that is past its prime. We had significant problems this past election with both the memory cards and the AccuVote machines. Our election workers have been fantastic over the years, but we are finding that folks are retiring, they're moving out of state, they're traveling, and we don't have backfill, so we have challenges each year with the 650 election workers that we need to staff the 122 polling locations. So it's a combination of exploring a way to increase voter turnout, but also to recognize that the system that we have currently that we're using for elections is an archaic system with some challenges. So just
Those are the reasons to do it, and I think they're good ones. I was just, to somebody who says, vote by mail is going to be cheaper, we're going to have a lot of extra money, you say, no, the startup costs are going to eat all of it.
I'm going to say that, I would say that it's, it requires purchasing of some pretty large pieces of equipment. But over time, I mean, if you think about when you have 150 AccuVotes that you're sending out back and forth each year, the wear and tear that you get on those versus, a few large pieces of equipment that a small handful of highly trained individuals are handling with, you have less.
But even in the long term, we're not going to achieve savings because we hope to double turnout, and even if it's half as expensive in vote by mail, that it will. We see it not as primarily a monetary saver over the long run, but as a increase in voter turnout. Again, with the caveat that we might have had to spend a whole bunch of money on fixing these problems that are coming down the pike in our whole system.
So it's pay now or pay later. And also, there is the potential, if other jurisdictions decided to go by mail, that we might get a contract from them to do their vote counting, which might lower our overall cost.
Sending a Fairbanks election to Anchorage, they wouldn't have it. They wouldn't sign the thing.
What you just said actually just brought up something I hadn't thought about before. If we have basically our entire election system built around several large machines that are in one place, then we have a single point of failure. If there was a fire, for example, first of all, I assume these machines will be insured to Wazoo, but are you at all worried that we could, basically not be able to conduct an election if there was some kind of catastrophic event in our little election center?
I think with elections, you always have to look at worst case scenario. And I think we've, in elections, gone through a variety of worst case scenarios, and I think speaking from 2012 experience, it's challenging when things happen at 64 polling locations across the city, maybe more so than just one specific location, and that's what we saw with 2012. We couldn't respond quickly enough to the ballot shortages across the city, and that is part of the conversation about bringing it into a centralized location. And then when you do have it in a centralized location, to make sure that you have a backup plan in place for all of the various disasters that could happen with your stuff.
Are we going to hold on to the AccuVote machines?
We borrow them from the state, so we
Okay.
don't actually
Right.
own those machines. We
Right.
use the state's.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great. Any additional information or questions from anyone about vote by mail? Well, fantastic. I guess we're down to the point of our audience participation. Any questions or comments from those in the audience today?
I think from the Dunsmores.
Your brother's done well.
Thank you guys for working on it. I was here to hear about the vote by mail.
Oh, good. Well, great. Well, I guess then we will adjourn until our meeting on the fourth Tuesday or fourth Wednesday of next month.
And we can take it offline, but I'll just touch base with you about that meeting.
Date.
We'll do it at the end.
All right, great. Well, then this meeting is adjourned.